Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, art, and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. So you know how I've been predicting things are going to get seriously unstable in the Hot 100 for a little while now? Well, we got a big one this week. Major shifts in the top 10, including a new number 1. A ton of major shifts up and down the Hot 100, and a whole big crop of new entries. A shame that more of them aren't better, but we'll get to that. Of course, Billboard also exacerbated the situation with the choice to shift their chart formula to better temper the impact of streaming, given what happened last year, which they did by slightly shifting the balance in favor of sales. So, okay, pretty major shift. How did that turn out? Well, let's start off with our top 10, where Justin Bieber becomes one of the few artists in the history of the chart to replace himself at the top, with Love Yourself rising up to number 1. And while the shift in streaming inevitably helped, especially with the song doing solidly in sales and not slowing down yet on airplay, what probably helped more was the weakness of his other track, Sorry, which while it holds YouTube down, took a considerable sales hit and airplay starting to tip towards the downturn at number 2. Where the shift definitely helped out was for Stressed Out by 21 Pilots to rise up to number 3. As sales have always been strong, airplay gains are not slowing down, and while YouTube really isn't there, the streaming is still pretty significant. Of course, the weakness of Hello by Adele should be recognized as well, sliding down to number 4 on hard airplay, streaming, and sales losses, with YouTube providing just enough to hold it up a little bit longer. But the formula shift is definitely not in that song's favor, and the competition is a lot stiffer now, with the first challenger being our first new top 10 entry, Flo Rida with My House at number 5. And you know, I should be less surprised that this is doing as well as I am, because it's got big sales and it's gaining on streaming and airplay, but I'm sorry, I'm just baffled that Flo Rida, of all people, still has a career a good 4 years after the club boom crashed and burned. But then again, it's not like dance music is going away anytime soon, because Roses by the Chainsmokers featuring Roses picked up to number 6, although the gains were a little bit more balanced, with modest gains in streaming and airplay to compensate for only kind of decent sales. But even that might not be enough to hold off that Selena Gomez double feature, the first being Hands to Myself coming in at number 7, rising up to that our second new top 10 entry, which picked up considerable YouTube, sales, streaming, and is only now gaining the airplay that it needs. Expect this to be around for a while, folks. The radio likes Selena Gomez, although I have no idea why. Now, don't expect that for Same Old Love, though, which slid down to number 8 thanks to losses in streaming and weak sales. It's basically being propped up on sliding airplay, and probably not for much longer. And this takes us to our third new top 10 entry, one off an album that dropped out of nowhere that I've already reviewed, Work by Rihanna featuring Drake at number 9. I'll talk a little bit more about the song's actual quality a bit later in this video, but suffice it to say, it's here thanks to absolutely huge sales off of just a few days of tracking, and while the airplay is rocketing up to provide support to it, it'll be a question of the margins to see if and its streaming can catch up. Finally, we've got Here by Alessia Cara, which slid down to number 10 and probably won't last if the airplay and streaming keep dropping the way it is. Don't expect this to be in the top 10 for much longer. And speaking of losses, we've got a hefty slice of losers and dropouts this week too. Let's blow through the latter category pretty quickly, as most of these have been long in coming. I'll Show You by Justin Bieber, New Americana by Halsey, thank God, Lay It All On Me by Rudimental featuring Ed Sheeran, Come Get Her by Ray Shrimmer, again, thank God, and Right Hand by Drake. All these are sputtering out of momentum for weeks now, plus the expected 20-week exit for Locked Away by Rock City featuring Adam Levine. But where things get truly interesting are in the chart losses, which might seem to indicate that people might be getting sick of new crunk dance songs because we saw heavy losses there this week, although most of that you can probably chalk up to the formula adjustment. A lot of these songs were huge on streaming and nowhere else. Silento probably got the worst of it, with Watch Me falling down to 39 and Dessert with Darwin dropping hard to 90, but Bet You Can't Do It Like Me by D-Lo lost hard too, sliding down to 78. Other songs that relied heavily on streaming took some big hits too, with Sorry Not Sorry by Bryson Tiller falling down to 77, Back Up by DJ Lo featuring Big Sean going down to 83, and worst of all, Focus by Ariana Grande falling down a hard to 89. Now beyond that, we had the expected slide down for Emperor's New Clothes by Panic at the Disco going down to 96 after its return to the charts last week, but the rest of the story is looking at country, where I Love This Life by Low Cash fell down to 68, I Got the Boy by Jana Kramer dropped down to 73, and Gonna Know We Were Here by Jason Aldean went down to 93. It looks like country radio is doing its mass replacement with the change of the season, but we'll talk more about that when we come to our new arrivals, because spoilers, we have a lot of country. Now that said, country also showed up in our gains this week, with You Should Be Here by Cole Swindle gaining a lot of major momentum up to 60, and We Went by Randy Houser jumping up to 72. Of course, some of that has to do with a refocus on sales, where country tends to excel over streaming. I'm not exactly surprised by this. It certainly explains why our debuts last week did as well as they did here, with 7 Years by Lucas Graham moving up to 57, I Took a Pill in Ibiza by Mike Posner surging up to 59, and bizarrely, Walking on a Dream by Empire of the Sun rose up to 65. All which feel a little bit weird to see on the Hot 100. I mean, that song's from 8 years ago. Hell, it even gave a bit of a boost to songs that haven't really taken off, like Let It Go by James Bay going up to 75, or Good to Be Alive, Hallelujah by Andy Grammer going up to 70. That gain that surprised me the most was probably Watch Out by 2 Chainz leaping up to 64. Lovely, his career is coming back, as if we needed that. And since I've already talked about Hands to Myself by Selena Gomez, we might as well jump into our new arrivals, starting with number 100, Snapback by Old Dominion. Breaking hearts like only you can in your snapback. So I avoided covering Old Dominion's debut album last year. I know I've made it my mission to cover country records both good and bad, but you know, I have limited hours in a day, and time spent on a record that Buzz suggested was absolutely rancid, that's time wasted. So I had no expectations that Snapback would be any good, and I was half right, and that it's more forgettably thin and painfully mediocre than the outright offensive breakup with him. Because, let's be honest here, this is just the most modern permutation of bro country, following in the non-country vein of Sam Hunt, with that spindly little groove, the synth completely lacking in body that blurs together with the painfully thin guitars, an overcompressed groove, and a parade of brand names that anchors its hook in the slang name for a girl's baseball cap. And outside of even more attempts to pander to a younger demographic, I mean selfies and Ray-Bans and Converse, from a frontman that has little to no personality, I wouldn't be surprised if I forgot this the day after I finished this episode. Next, number 98, Somewhere on a Beach by Dierks Bentley. She got a body and she's naughty, and she got me like you ain't ever got me. I'm getting some, and I ain't slept in a week. Yeah, I'm somewhere on a beach. I had heard about the backlash about this song long before I'd actually heard the song, heralded as the sort of trashy beach fodder that came with plenty of obnoxiousness along the way. The sort of debut song you kind of expect Dierks Bentley to sound much obliged by his label to push to radio since Drunk on a Plane got so huge. And make no mistake, this is effectively Drunk on a Plane Part 2. But where there is a hint of drunken desperation to that song that's made it somewhat palatable, there's a lot less to excuse this one. For one, the beach vibe is a lot less novel for country music, and just another excuse for Bentley to leer at his new girl, and he doesn't quite have the same affable charisma that Jake Owen does to make it feel less sleazy. Granted, the stiffer percussion, the R&B vibe, and that thicker fuzz of the guitar aren't really helping here. It's just not a comfortable fit for Dierks Bentley. He's a lot better than this. In other words, yeah, disappointed. It's not going to be recommended. Number 97, Bottom of the Bottle by Curren featuring August Alsina and Lil Wayne. Drop it down low, bring it up real slow. About to go down, make me say, oh, yo. Drop it down low, bring it up slow, yo. Yo. Drop it down low, bring it up slow, yo. Yo. It's weird seeing Curren on the charts, if only because he's one of those young money artists who could have just broken around the turn of the decade and just didn't. And considering the sheer amount of material that he's pumped out either through albums or mixtapes, it's a little bit surprising that this is now his highest charting single to date, driven by a sparse guitar melody and windy percussion, an ass anthem hook from August Alsina, and a surprisingly focused verse from Lil Wayne that's all about sex. And really, a few listens to this track make it clear why he hasn't quite taken off, because there's just not a lot here to the guy beyond the instrumental and the hook that stands out for me. It's not precisely a bad song, the chill vibe of it all does remind me a little bit of Lil Wayne's Glory Days, and he does sound decent on this track, but it's nothing all that special either. Take it or leave it. Number 95, Humble and Kind by Tim McGraw. Come to you when the work you put in is realized. Let yourself feel the pride, but always stay humble and kind. I get the feeling that Tim McGraw has cracked the code to his single releases, at least in terms of subverting expectations. His first single will be a stab at mainstream country radio that everybody will either forget or hate, only for the face turn for the second single to go over a lot better just in contrast. He did it with Meanwhile Back at Mama's and Diamond Rings and Old Barstools for his last album, and he's doing it here with Humble and Kind. And yet, I wouldn't quite say this song is quite on that level, mostly because it runs a little bit simpler in his entreaties that Tim McGraw gives to kids to basically just be good people even when life gets hard. And while it isn't really that preachy and the plucky guitars do have some good atmosphere against the strings, it rings a little bit like mom music, if that makes any sense. And fine, cater to your target audience, but I would have liked to see him push a little bit harder and actually build some conflict as to why somebody would choose not to be a good person. As it is, without a lot of conflict, it's a bit of a snoozer, albeit a pleasant one. I guess I can take it. Number 94, Country Nation by Brad Paisley.
We crank up our music Friday nights on 2,000 country stations. Yeah, we're one big country nation, that's right.
You know, I liked a fair few songs from Brad Paisley's 2014 album Moonshine in the Trunk, but it does get a little bit exasperating when he chooses songs with less momentum and power for his singles, this being the fourth from that album and not one of my favorites. Now, don't get me wrong, I like that he included real fiddles and steel guitars to anchor his more restrained guitar work on this song, but this is basically a laundry list of college football teams and blue-collar jobs that like country music. And considering Brad Paisley can be a much more clever writer in his music, this just smacks of a lack of effort and a little shameless pandering that doesn't nearly have the swell to redeem it. Overall, I don't dislike it, the instrumentation is still good, but I'm also not going to remember it. Just saying. Number 91, My Church by Maren Morris.
When I play the highway FM, I find my soul revival, singing every single verse. Yeah, I guess that's my church.
Holy God, there's a lot of country breaking onto the charts this week, and if you want an example how that change in formula to tilt towards sales is going to have impact, it's in this way. In any case, Maren Morris is an upcoming country artist from Texas, and while she has had a few indie albums released in her teenage years, this is her first single off an EP with Columbia Nashville to manage to break onto the radio. And frankly, I'm amazed she's breaking through with this sort of sound at all, but especially with the hollow, more vintage-leaning production. This sounds like the sort of indie country that I really like. I'd hear from like Whitney Rose or Lindy Ortega, just not quite as dusty, more mainstream friendly. The vocal layering is excellent, the guitars balance against Morris's throatier vocals really well, and even the lyrics are pretty solid, finding that spiritual fulfillment in music when real church doesn't always deliver. And yeah, that definitely speaks to me. In other words, make me out for covering that debut album, because I'll be amazed if Morris sticks around in the mainstream, but I definitely love to hear more from her. Check this out if you haven't, it's really good. Number 87, I Like the Sound of That by Rascal Flatts.
Come on over, I just wanna hear that ringtone. I like it turned up when you're blowing up my phone. Wanna hear you say come on over, 'cause when you tell me to come on over, I like the sound of that. I like the sound, I like the sound of that.
Now, in contrast, for those of you who missed my Rascal Flatts review back in 2014, here's the short of it. I'm not a fan of these guys. At all. They contributed way too much to the watered down pop country of the mid-2000s that pushed me away from the genre in the first place, and then have spent recent years trying desperately to catch up with the trends. Now, this song was actually on their 2014 album Rewind and was co-written by Meghan Trainor and Dan and Shay. I don't remember a single damn thing about it, and then I re-listened to it and I was reminded why, as it's easily one of the worst songs off of that album. Yeah, the guitars are prominent, at least till they ebb out for the drum machine, the percussion that swamps out the entire mix, but keep in mind, this is a song where Rascal Flatts is singing about hooking up with this girl, and it feels so chaste that you almost don't notice that the only thing he describes about this girl is that Justin Timberlake has nothing on her in the way that she sings in the shower. As it is, it's probably more formlessly generic than outright awful, but it's not anything I'm gonna care about again, and it's probably why I forgot it the last time. Next, number 81, Something in the Way You Move by Ellie Goulding. You know, I'll admit it, I came down really hard on Ellie Goulding's most recent album, Delirium, for being nowhere near as close to what it should have been. But I'm not going to deny that she's got some good songs on that record. And while my choice of single for her next would probably have been Lost and Found, which is all kinds of wonderful, really love that song, I actually quite like this track too. And again, even though the premise is that the dance floor hookup that we've seen time and time again, it's the details that I really like about this. The subtle quick tempo with a thrumming bass, the higher keys, the melodic accent, the great galloping momentum and spacious production from Greg Kurstin. To me, it's a damn fine pop song that I actually quite like. Again, I don't think this is going to supplant any of her best tracks, but most of the time, I'll take this. Definitely recommended. Number 56, Bake Sale by Wiz Khalifa featuring Travis Scott.
On this day, yeah, yeah. We can't wait to break, yeah, yeah.
What you say, bro?
I've been on the phone, yeah. Getting calls from home, yeah.
Okay, let's be honest here. Does anybody still care about Wiz Khalifa? Even on his last #1 hit, See You Again, the majority of the people cannot tell me that he was the reason that you liked that song, or that you remembered anything he said on that song. So when you hear that he's got an upcoming mixtape and he teamed up with Travis Scott, I did not have expectations that this was going to be all that good. And you know what? It's better than I expected. Look, of course it is going to be about weed, and Travis Scott's auto-tune moaning was going to be very tedious on the hook, but Wiz Khalifa was on a few decent flows that actually rhymed. Yeah, low expectations here, but it's a sign that Wiz Khalifa can spit with a little bit more intensity if he wants to. And while I definitely preferred this song when it got a little bit darker before the first chorus, there are things to like about this song, enough that I wouldn't mind if this was playing in the background. We'll see where that goes, even though, again, who cares about Wiz Khalifa anymore? Let's be real here. And finally, number 9, Work by Rihanna featuring Drake.
You see me do me dirt. There's something about that work. When you walk a line. I'm in the cafe, drive me a dessert. No time to have you lurking.
I kind of avoided talking about the song when I covered Auntie a few days ago, and that's mostly because beyond Drake, there's very little to the song that stands out for me. The pattern of the beat is pretty minimalist, Rihanna slurs her entire chorus so it's even more incomprehensible, and she's basically crooning about all the sex that she's not having. It actually does a fair bit to make Drake's R&B flavored verse pretty likable, as he just tries to sound burnt out as he tries to justify his distance, even as he tries to make something work, but then again, it's all trying, and if we're looking at Rihanna and Drake collaborations, it's no What's My Name or Take Care, both of which are a lot better both in their performances and the instrumentation. This, as a lead-off single for Auntie, I'm really underwhelmed by that. As I said, nothing really to the song, but then again, considering how underwhelmed I've been by Rihanna's entire rollout for Auntie, that might just be part of the course. So wow, that was a week where, well, we didn't really have big extremes going one way or the other, which makes picking best and worst kind of tricky. If I'm going for the worst, I'm giving it to Snapback by Old Dominion for some god-awful production, with a dishonorable mention going to Somewhere on a Beach by Dierks Bentley for being just such a disappointment. He's capable of a lot better. For best, it's a lot easier. My Church by Maren takes the top spot easily, while Ellie Goulding Something the Way You Move will probably be my honorable mention. I'm not sure how long this turbulence in the charts will last. I expect it will go quite longer given the albums that are coming out, but it's bound to keep things interesting. But till next time, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse. I'll see you next time.